Hey everyone, it's Dr. Ramani. And how many of you have felt that your narcissistic relationship literally made you feel heavy? You go through the world heavy, like almost like you're looking through something at everything, like it's just heavy, and everyone else seems a lot lighter. Well, let's talk about this idea whether radical acceptance can ultimately make you feel lighter. Radical acceptance is an essential building block of healing, but it's easier said than done. It's not as simple as they're not going to change, though that's a part of it. There are lots of pieces to radical acceptance. It's they're not going to change. Their behavior is not going to change. There's nothing I can do to change their behavior. There's nothing anyone can really do to change their behavior. Any behavior change they may make, even if they go into therapy, is not likely to be enough to significantly change this relationship. There is nothing else I could have done. I am not to blame for their behavior. There will always be some grief about this, right? So all these pieces, you're radically accepting all of that, right? That's a lot to take in. If it were just as simple as they're never going to change, that's actually strangely a little bit easier. It's still difficult to swallow that, but it's a little bit less complex. You would maybe accept that they're not going to change. Yeah, maybe you'd even assume like, okay, they're not going to change, so either I adjust to this or I get out. But the way that this relationship gets in and messes with your head and your soul and the sheer amount of injustice can mean that at best, radical acceptance feels like a booby prize, a weak-ass consolation prize. So for all of its importance in healing, it doesn't always feel like it will help. When the radical acceptance has to be about someone you care about or love or are supposed to love or have a history with, it's not easy to take that radically accepting view on someone, the idea of them never changing, of this circumstance never getting better. You're still hurt. And that is why part of radical acceptance is that you may not get so-called closure or justice. And we know that healing is far more difficult in the absence of justice. So when the narcissistic person waltzes off into the sunset with their new flavor du jour, and you're left holding the bag and the pieces and really feeling the depth of feeling, which they don't because they just don't feel deeply, you actually want to tell me to go F myself with all of this radical acceptance talk, and I get it. But radical acceptance does get you somewhere. I'll give you an example. It's a silly example, but it's an example. I remember a few times way back when I was in school, high school, and even college, and I was trying to wrangle and master a difficult concept, especially in a science class, like a statistics or chemistry or physics or math class. There would be a moment when I finally got it. The formula made sense. And it was as though you could never not get it right again. There was something very soothing about that moment. I was like, oh. And even though it was a hassle and a half to figure it out and learn it, and I was often pretty bored in those classes, once I got it, the anxiety lifted and I even felt lighter. As I said, I didn't enjoy these classes, but I would get it, and then I'd get it, and I would go on, and I would do fine in the class, but I felt lighter. Because it was like, oh, got it. Now, I've had countless clients say to me over the years, I hate radical acceptance, Dr. Ramani. It sucks. I sometimes even feel like a cynical, awful person because of it, as though I can't see the bright light in someone or their potential or their hope. But then there is that day, and it takes a minute, but it comes. And I have to say personally, from my chair as a therapist, it's a good day for them. Because the radical acceptance, in essence, has seeped into them. It's literally gotten into their DNA. And they will say, for example, it's really gross and creepy how quickly he got into a new relationship, but I now really do see that this new person is just going to have my experience, and it'll end badly, and I'm actually to the point where I kind of honestly don't care. He's someone else's problem now. Some people will say, you know, when I finally got it, understood what this, radically accepted, the holiday season wasn't as bad. They're like, every single bad thing that happened every year prior during the holidays happened, But it was as though I was watching a movie I had watched before. Like on an airplane when you just sort of watch the movie again to pass the time. I kind of felt detached from it. Someone else had said to me, I really believed in this hospital I was working in. Like, it was a hospital as part of a university. I thought we were doing great work here in this community. But when I really saw the leadership team clearly, I really saw them, in particular 2 people. I was able to reflect on the good work I did in this place and know in my heart it could never be done the right way there again. And I just counted down the clock until I got my extended health care benefits and I found a new job. I think at one time I kept fighting and fighting in this job because I wanted them to do the right thing. But once I knew they never would, leaving was easier. For each of these people and their stories, it was absolute agony for them to get there. Sleepless nights, depression, anxiety, panic attacks, self-blame, self-doubt, self-disparagement, and of course, all of the BS that they had to endure in the narcissistic relationships. But all of them, and many more, have said, once I hit radical acceptance, hard as it was, ultimately I felt lighter. And that despite the grief and the loss of the story and the life that they hoped for, they still felt lighter. So what's that about? Getting it, just understanding it deeply at the level of radical acceptance. It lifts something off of you. Radical acceptance, like all the way down, like I said, into your DNA, radical acceptance means you fully see it. And it's not what you wanted to see, but you see it and you get it. And then slowly some other things may lift a little bit too. The self-blame. You think to yourself, no, there was no other way I could have said it. No, there was nothing more I could have done. Some of the self-doubt may lift. You might think like, it may not be the right answer, but I feel more comfortable doing it this way. And while the rumination may not fully lift, your rumination might actually start circling back into more of a solution. It can be uncomfortable watching someone new, for example, in their life, get all of the new love bombing. You know what that was like. But then you can play the story out. You know where it goes. And the pang and the rumination may hit for a minute or even longer until you know that your ex-narcissist who's with someone new will ultimately also minimize and marginalize and mock or crumble once their lives aren't going exactly the way they want. It's how the story always goes. Thanksgiving will always be a disaster, and there was no perfect way to make it to please that narcissistic person. Once you radically accept, you will have more time, more mental space, and something lifts off of you, right? In its simple form, it's like me finally understanding how the math problem worked. I still didn't like the math class, but I was able to get through it with a lot less misery. I was lighter when I walked into the classroom. I was glad when it was done, but it was easier. The grief stays with you, folks. I wish I could say you radically accept and then you're light and breezy and it doesn't feel bad ever again. You will grieve not having the family you wanted, or the childhood you wanted, or the career you had hoped, or the friend ending up being a backstabbing weasel. That stuff sucks. And when it's more primal, like family, you do have that. But despite the weight of the grief, the lightness of not thinking you can do something about it, the not plotting out the chess moves to make the holiday season or the family vacation go more smoothly, or try to lose enough weight so he doesn't notice someone else, or do the job perfectly so you're promoted. There is a lightness to knowing you no longer have to try so hard. In fact, at best, you just need to figure out some of the fundamental workarounds for your narcissistic relationship. A little bit of yellow rocking, perhaps, or some disengaging, or finding your other people out in the world to share your good news with, or starting a side hustle that can turn into a full-time gig if you could make it work. You put your energy elsewhere. You stop trying to make the narcissistic relationship work. Being in a narcissistic relationship is a bit like living in a whodunit detective story. Because once you see it, the story becomes a lot less interesting, but it also lifts a lot of tension. And with that, a heaviness gets lifted. You do feel lighter once you radically accept. And while the grief and the ick are always there, somehow radically accepting can also foster self-compassion and even the possibility of integrating what has happened as part of a larger picture of meaning and purpose. It takes a minute. There is no fast track to this, but you will get there. And when you do, this lightness of radical acceptance will be sort of a weight loss like no other. Because when your soul feels lighter, everything fits. And one last thing, something else to help you feel a little lighter. I wanted to take a moment to let you know something exciting. And it is, I have a new book coming out in February of 2024 called It's Not You. It's available for pre-order now. Click the link in the video description to check it out. Mean the world to me if you pre-order it, and it could become your manual on how, kind of an instruction manual for how to not only navigate, but ultimately heal from one of these relationships. Pre-order link right there. Click it, get it. Thank you.